90 seconds. That is how long it took one 23-year-old to take Argentina's celebrations, fold them into a paper aeroplane, and throw them out of the Lusail Stadium window. 2-0. The trophy was practically engraved. Messi was already smiling. Then, in the 81st minute of the greatest final ever played on live television, Kylian Mbappé scored a goal. Peter Drury called him an awesome force of nature. Drury was underselling it. This is how one man carried his own country alone.
Mbappé, Thuram, Mbappé! Oh wow! He is an awesome force of nature!
To understand the night Mbappé made an entire country shiver, you have to go back 4 years earlier, to Kazan, to the round of 16, to the first time he and Argentina ever shared the same patch of grass. Russia, 2018. Argentina arrived at the World Cup as the team Lionel Messi was supposedly going to drag to a trophy by the throat. They limped through the group stage. They argued in the dressing room. They reportedly mutinied against their own coach. And on June 30th, 2018, they ran into a teenager who had not yet turned 20. He was 19 years old. He was wearing the number 10 he had stolen from Karim Benzema's locker after Benzema's exile. And he ran at the Argentine defense the way a wolf runs at a flock of sheep that has, somehow, forgotten what wolves are. His first sprint clocked 38 kilometers per hour. Marcos Rojo, the experienced centre-back, simply stopped trying. He fouled him in the box. Penalty. Antoine Griezmann scored. Then Mbappé did it again. And again. He scored 2 goals. He won a penalty. He destroyed Argentina 4-3 in what most neutrals still consider the greatest game of the entire 2018 tournament. And the world fell in love. Pelé tweeted at him. Ronaldo, the Brazilian one, said he was the future. Argentine fans, weeping in the stands, applauded him as he left the pitch. There is footage of grown men in sky blue shirts standing up to clap a teenager who had just ended their World Cup. They knew. Everyone knew. We were watching the air. He went on to score in the final against Croatia. He became the first teenager since Pelé in 1958 to score in a World Cup final. He lifted the trophy at 19. He went home, did his school homework, and donated his entire World Cup salary to charity. The world did not just love him, the world anointed him. Mbappé was supposed to be the next 10 years of football, possibly the next 20. He was the heir to Messi and Ronaldo, except faster, younger, and somehow, against all probability, also seemed like a nice kid. Remember that, the world loved him. Argentina, of all places, applauded him. Keep that detail in your back pocket. We're going to need it later. 4 years passed, and in those 4 years, the laws of football began to bend around one player. Mbappé won Ligue 1 4 times. He scored in seemingly every PSG game that mattered, and most of the ones that didn't. Mbappé played a major role in leading PSG to their first ever UEFA Champions League final. He won a domestic quadruple with PSG, the League, the French Cup, the League Cup, and the Champions Cup. And he had endless individual achievements, as he won the Golden Boot 4 times before the World Cup kickoff. In Qatar, France arrived as defending champions, and they were a wreck. Pogba, injured. Kanté, injured. Karim Benzema, the reigning Ballon d'Or winner, ruled out the day before the tournament started. The official excuse was a thigh injury. The unofficial excuse was a feud with Didier Deschamps, so old it has its own Wikipedia page. So France, the world champions, walked into Qatar without their best midfielder, their best holder, and their best striker. And they still made it to the final. How? Because of a 23-year-old who scored 5 goals on the way there. Because of a young man who, when asked at a press conference if he felt pressure, smiled and said, quote, "I was born for this." He was right. By the time France reached December 18th, 2022, the math had become absurd. Mbappé was directly involved in nearly half of every chance France created. Olivier Giroud, the 36-year-old striker, was scoring goals because Mbappé was drawing every defender within 50 meters. Antoine Griezmann was orchestrating because Mbappé was the only player Argentina were going to plan their entire tournament around. The Argentine coaching staff, led by Lionel Scaloni, watched film of Mbappé for 4 straight days. They held meetings. They drew up specific marking schemes. Nicolas Otamendi was assigned, more or less personally, to make Mbappé miserable for 90 minutes. And for 80 minutes, it worked. Lusail Stadium, December 18th, 2022. 88,000 fans, the largest crowd in World Cup history. Argentina kicked off and immediately strangled France. Di Maria, playing on the left wing for the first time in months, ran past Ousmane Dembélé like Dembélé was holding a coffee. Messi, in his last World Cup, in his last final, in his last shot at the only trophy missing from his cabinet, looked 25 years old again. 23rd minute. Di Maria gets fouled in the box. Messi steps up. 1-0. 36th minute. Messi to Alvarez, to McAllister, to Di Maria. The most beautiful team goal of the tournament. 2-0. The cameras cut to the French bench. Didier Deschamps had already substituted off Olivier Giroud and Ousmane Dembélé before half-time. He had used 2 of his 5 subs in 40 minutes. His team had not registered a single shot on goal. Not on target. Not off target. None. This was not a game. This was an execution. And in the middle of it, walking around like a man trying to remember why he came to a party, was Kylian Mbappé. He had touched the ball 19 times in the first half. He had attempted 1 shot. He had completed 1 dribble. The Argentine plan, the 4 days of film study, the personal marking by Otamendi. It was all working. The teenage demolition man from 2018 looked, in 2022, like an extra. The second half started. Argentina kept dominating. Mbappé kept disappearing. In the 75th minute, Argentine fans in Buenos Aires started chanting. In Qatar, the celebrations were beginning. Some Argentine substitutes were already standing up to embrace each other. Lionel Messi was about to win the World Cup. The story was already written, the headlines were drafted. Somewhere in a dark corner of FIFA's archives, the engraving on the trophy was being prepared. And nobody told Kylian Mbappé. The 79th minute. Marcus Thuram, a substitute, runs into the Argentine box. Otamendi, the man who had been ordered personally to handle Mbappé, has wandered upfield. There is contact. There is a fall. There is a whistle. Penalty. The man who steps up is the man who has done nothing for 79 minutes. Emiliano Martinez, the Argentine goalkeeper, the penalty specialist, the man who would later make a save so unbelievable, it should be in a science museum. He picks the right corner. He gets a hand to the ball, and the ball goes in anyway. Mbappé hit it so hard, the laws of physics filed a complaint. 2-1. Now, pause. This is the part everyone forgets. What happens next is not a comeback. A comeback takes time. A comeback has a montage. What happens next happens in 90 seconds. Argentina kick off. Messi receives the ball in midfield. Kingsley Coman, another French substitute, robs him. Mbappé runs. Mbappé passes to Thuram. Thuram lays it back. Mbappé arrives at the ball, on the half volley, with his weaker foot, and detonates it past Martinez. 81st minute, 2-2. Peter Drury, the commentator, called him an awesome force of nature. Peter Drury was, if anything, underselling it. For 90 seconds, the entire physics of the 2022 World Cup final flipped upside down. Argentina were now in a fight for their lives. The trophy was being unengraved. The headlines were being shredded. And in those 90 seconds, an entire country went into psychological freefall. Argentine fans, who had been singing, started biting their fingernails. The Argentine bench, which had been embracing, started arguing. Messi, who had been smiling, started looking at the floor. You could feel it. You could practically smell it. 8 years of trauma, a country's worth of penalty shootout PTSD, every painful memory of the 2014 final and the Copa America losses, all of it rushing back into the heads of 45 million people at the same time. Mbappe had not just scored 2 goals in 90 seconds. He had reached into the chest of an entire nation and squeezed.
Compelled, obliged. France just might. Rabiot. Mbappe. Thuram. Mbappe! Oh, wow! He is an awesome force of nature!
90 minutes ended. 2-2. Extra time. Mbappe, who had been a ghost for 78 minutes, was now everywhere. And then, in the 109th minute, Argentina scored again. Messi, the inevitable man, poked in a rebound. 3-2. This was the moment. The trophy was Argentina's. Again. 2 minutes left. The clock counting down. The most dramatic World Cup final in living memory was finally ending the way the script demanded. And then, of course, a French corner, a scramble. The ball hits Gonzalo Montiel's arm. Penalty. The whistle blows. The referee points to the spot. Kylian Mbappe walks toward the ball. Let that picture exist in your head for a second. The reigning World Cup champions are losing in the 118th minute of the World Cup final. They have nobody left. Their best playmaker is sitting on the bench. Their own coach, Didier Deschamps, has run out of ideas. And one 23-year-old, alone, walks up to a penalty in a stadium of 88,000 people against the best penalty-saving goalkeeper in the world and slots it. 3-3. Hat-trick. The first hat-trick in a World Cup final since 1966. Jeff Hurst, the only other man to ever do it, was watching at home. He probably stood up. He probably whispered, "Fair play, kid." This was not football anymore. This was performance art. This was a one-man country trying to bend reality through sheer refusal to lose. And he wasn't done. And when you watch that Kolo Muani miss, you will understand that France wouldn't make it that far without Mbappe. Argentine fans, in the stands and at home, will tell you that save was the single greatest moment of their lives. Mbappe fans will tell you Kolo Muani should be stripped of his French citizenship. Both groups are, in a way, correct. In the last seconds of extra time, Mbappe exploded into the box with a lightning dribble, weaving past 3 Argentine defenders with sharp feints and pace. He shaped to shoot, took an extra touch to beat another man, and unleashed a powerful shot, and the final whistle blew moments later. The penalty shootout was a formality. Mbappe, naturally, scored. Argentina won 3-2 on penalties. Lionel Messi, the inevitable man, finally got the only trophy he had ever wanted. The headlines, the ones that had been drafted, then shredded, then drafted again, were finally allowed to print. Argentina, champions of the world. But somewhere, in a corner of the Lusail Stadium, a 23-year-old was walking toward his own bench with 3 goals scored, a golden boot won, and a silver medal around his neck. The greatest individual performance in a World Cup final in 56 years, and he had nothing to show for it.
Messi and Mbappe. They were incomprehensibly great. I loved every second of it. I didn't even want to watch the NFL the rest of the day. The World Cup was that great, Tony. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Here is where the story gets weird. Here is where football, which had always rewarded Mbappe, began to take its revenge. The first real signs of friction appeared during the March 2023 international break. This was when Mbappe was appointed captain. Some early questions emerged about his leadership style and relationship with Didier Deschamps. Minor media and fan scrutiny started building around whether the huge expectations post-World Cup were weighing on him. At Euro 2024, Mbappe broke his nose in the first game. He played the rest of the tournament in a black face mask that made him look, frankly, like a Marvel villain. France made it to the semi-final. Mbappe scored one penalty in the entire tournament. He went home empty-handed. His PSG career ended in a slow-motion divorce that lasted 2 years. He announced he was leaving. He unannounced he was leaving. He fought with the club. He fought with the manager. He took PSG to a labour tribunal over unpaid wages. He won. The relationship, once the most lucrative in football, ended in a courtroom. In 2024, he finally moved to Real Madrid, the transfer that the entire football world had been waiting for since 2017. The dream, the throne, the handover from Cristiano to Kylian. His first season was fine. 43 goals, a golden boot. By any normal player's standards, an excellent year. But Mbappe had stopped being a normal player years ago. He was being measured against Cristiano Ronaldo's first season at Madrid, Lionel Messi's first season anywhere, his own ceiling. The criticism, which had been a quiet hum in 2023, became a roar in 2025. He was selfish. He was a poor leader. His body language was bad. He was missing in big games.
As the boys are saying, we're talking about a guy who's up there. And he has to prove now that mentally he can handle Real Madrid. Because it's a different ballgame being a PSG in Liga to the expectation and the place that is Real Madrid. He's got to show that he's capable of getting over that.
He was not, said the pundits, the heir to anything anymore. He was the next Eden Hazard, the next Neymar, the next great talent who simply, mysteriously, didn't quite get there. By 2026, the consensus has hardened. Kylian Mbappe, the boy who carried an entire nation through a final on his own back, is now widely described as a disappointment. Let that sink in. The disappointment.
Messi, if you're going to be Ronaldo, if you're going to be Kylian Mbappe, you're going to get all the attention. And so when you do score the goals, people are going to go crazy because you are Mbappe. And when you don't score the goals, people are going to go crazy because you're not, because you're killing Mbappe.
Football has always done this. Football is, at its core, a machine that builds heroes and then resents them for not being immortal. George Best was a hero at 22 and a punchline at 30. Diego Maradona was crucified by the same Argentina that loved him. Ronaldinho was forgotten before he was 40. Even Messi, the inevitable Messi, the man whose final this was, spent a decade being told he was a bottler, a quitter, a man who could not deliver on the international stage. Football builds you up so that it has somewhere to drop you from. And Mbappe has been climbing toward the cliff edge for 8 years. The criticism in 2026 is not, technically, wrong.
Taking shots when they're not on. Not an elite Kylian Mbappe who's on 100 million a year, who's not a kid, who's had 5-6 seasons, is a World Cup winner. You know, I don't have a lot of sympathy for him.
He probably should have been better at Real Madrid. He probably should have led France further at Euro 2024. He probably should have, at 27 years old, already lifted a Champions League trophy. But the criticism is also, in another sense, completely insane. Because the criticism comes from the same fans, the same pundits, the same panels, the same newsrooms that watched him single-handedly try to rip the World Cup out of Argentina's hands in 2022. The criticism comes from a culture that demands that one man, alone, drag entire teams to glory, and then punishes him when he can't drag them far enough. The criticism is, fundamentally, about expectation. We expected him to be Messi, plus Ronaldo, plus a fresh bicycle. We expected him to win Champions Leagues with a PSG that couldn't pass the ball out of its own half. We expected him to win the World Cup with a French team that had its best players sitting on a hospital bench. When he failed, we forgot what we asked him to do.
Say that Kylian Mbappe is not a robot, he's not a Superman.
The fact that there is this amount of attention on him is because he's warranted that attention given his performances. Now,
Here is the truth that gets lost in 2026. In the 79th minute of the 2022 World Cup final, Kylian Mbappe was on a French team that had, statistically, been outplayed harder than any defending champion in finals history. His best teammates were on the bench or on a treatment table. His coach had used substitutes before half-time out of pure desperation. His manager looked, on camera, like a man waiting for a doctor's appointment. And Mbappe, alone, scored a hat-trick. A hat-trick. In a final. In the last 20 minutes of regulation, plus extra time. Against the eventual world champions. 3 goals. 2 penalties under pressure that would have crushed lesser men. 1 half volley that should be in the Louvre. 8 shots. 6 on target. 2 assists generated by his gravitational pull alone. And he lost. He lost because the universe, which had loved him as a teenager, had decided that 23 was old enough to start learning that football is a cruel sport. He lost because Lionel Messi, the inevitable man, was inevitable. He lost because Emiliano Martinez made a save that nobody, in 200 years of football history, had any business making. He lost, and he did not lose because he was not great. He lost because he was alone. You don't get to be more than great. You get to be a young man with a golden boot, a silver medal, and a long, slow career of being told you should have done more. And here is the irony, the dark joke, the piece of cosmic comedy that football served us in real time. The man who was carried over the line in 2022 was Lionel Messi, who had teammates. The man who was abandoned at the end of 2022 was Kylian Mbappe, who didn't. This is the problem. How do you carry a country alone? You don't. You can't. Even at 38 kilometers an hour, even with a hat-trick in a final, even with the body of a sprinter and the technique of a midfielder and the mind of a chess player, you cannot win a World Cup final by yourself. But the world will ask you to, and when you fail, the world will write you off. Kylian Mbappe, in 2026, is being criticized for things that, in another era, would have been celebrated. He is being judged against players who had Iniesta, Xavi, Busquets, Pirlo, Gattuso, Modric. He is being measured against squads while playing alone. Will history fix this? Probably. History tends to be kinder to footballers than the present is. 20 years from now, the highlight reel of Mbappe's hat-trick will be shown on every World Cup retrospective ever made. The criticism of 2026 will be a footnote, the face mask. The Real Madrid struggles, the Euro disappointment, they will all become small, forgivable things. What will survive is 90 seconds in the 80th minute of December 18th, 2022, when one man, alone, dragged 68 million people to the very edge of a third star. He didn't get there. He got close. He got closer than anyone had any right to expect. And for that, in 2026, we are punishing him. If you want to follow the story of how a skinny winger who only used 1 foot outplayed everyone, check out video here.
Same with Mbappe. When the whole world is watching you do that, that's an incredibly great exit. So if you want to say, if anybody wants to say it's the greatest of all time, I don't know enough to argue, but I will say if you say that, no one can tell you to shut up. No.